Chapter 21. First Safari. John Hamman, 24. Cretaceous. John watched the cloud of dust disappear into the setting sun. He felt a little lost. This was what he'd been aiming for. He had an expedition party ready to go on a safari, but wasn't sure what to do. Should he do it? He could stay here and look for elephants. He could shoot ivory, as if that wasn't adventure enough for any man. John looked at the waiting faces, turned to him. The men were unsure. Manny's gaze was warm and trusting, and the Maasai's like a statue. This was it. He might as well make a start. He looked around. So be it.
Manny, do any of them speak English?
No English, Bwana. I speak very good English. Do not worry, Bwana. They know what to do.
Manny's grin was wide, filled with supreme confidence in himself, in John, and in all the world. How could John say any of this in a way that they would understand?
Can you explain to them that we are not going on an ordinary safari? We are not going to hunt here. We are going to go to a place very far away. We will hunt animals they have never seen before.
Manny grinned broadly.
We hunt all kinds of animals, Bwana. It does not matter. All is as God wills it.
John didn't have any response for that. He couldn't imagine how they would respond to what was coming. He told them to gather around. If he was going to do this, it was time. John set the dials and took one last look around at this landscape. As the last light of the setting sun dropped below the horizon, a light came on, and there was a beep. Then everything changed. It was hotter. The sun was high above their heads. The sea of grass was gone, and in its place was a drier landscape, dusty with a scattering of ferns and some larger plants. In the distance were taller trees. John wondered how they would react. Would they scream in fear? Would they attack him as some kind of devil? John's hand was on his gun. The men did none of these things. They hardly reacted at all. They looked around with curiosity, but that was all. Manny asked,
We hunt now, Bwana.
Yes, this is where we will hunt.
Manny turned to the Maasai, saying something John could not understand. The man turned and started to run with a long, steady stride toward the groves of taller trees.
He will find water, Bwana. There will be good hunting here.
The porters began picking up the bundles of supplies. John grabbed his guns, the big double and a Mauser carabiner 98A. He took out the ammo and loaded them both.
I will carry for you, Bwana.
Manny said solemnly, as if it had some greater meaning. John looked at the two guns and handed Manny the heavy double. He bowed his head briefly and took up station on John's right, a step behind, a position that he never left for all the years to come. They marched across a land they did not know in a time that was not their own. Manny and John led the way, with no particular direction in mind. They followed in the same direction that the tracker had gone, following in his wake. The porters of their small train followed after. Soon they began to sing. John was somewhat shocked by this. It was not exactly how he imagined stalking quietly through the bush. John turned to Manny to get him to quiet them, but he said,
Do not worry, Bwana. It is a good song.
That seemed to settle it. John was the amateur there. John was a little disappointed. They didn't see any large dinosaurs, but did scare up a few things. They flushed out a few small dinosaurs as they walked. The dinosaurs would streak out from groups of ferns as the column got close. It was like flushing jackrabbits out on the plains back home. At first, John thought they were birds, like little ostriches, but they had long tails with more feathers on the end of them. Their heads were like lizards on long necks that they held lower than an ostrich. They could raise their heads up high to look around, but generally carried them low and kept low when they took off running. They ran on two legs and were fast. John thought they could outdistance a jackrabbit. What he first took to be wings were shorter arms with long feathers on the back of them. John drew a fowling piece and slung the Mauser over his shoulder. He got 4 of them as they walked along. They did in fact have teeth, not a beak, and were about the weight of a large hen, but taller, with longer legs. They tied them to the packs as they went, like a game bird. At least there would be something in the pot tonight. Late in the afternoon, the Maasai returned. He stood up in front of them, off to the right, from behind a bush where he had been crouching. It was unnerving. Manny walked toward him, and they spoke. It was more than John had ever heard the man say. Manny came back, but the Maasai continued to stand there.
He has found water, Bwana. He say there's a creek bed, but it is dry. It runs into a water hole. It is not dry. He say there are many footprints at the water hole. The footprints are very big. He does not know these footprints. There is a place to camp.
John nodded and said that was good. The Maasai tracker turned and ran in front of them. They followed, and he came to a small hill with some larger ferns with short trunks like a tree. Manny said,
He say the water hole is a half-mile that way. We camp here, Bwana.
John took that as a suggestion.
Yes, we'll camp here.
We gather wood. We get water. You bring gun, Bwana.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I'll bring gun.
He left the fowling piece in the camp, and the Maasai led them toward the tree line. 4 of the porters came as well, carrying water barrels, hatchets, and short machetes. The trees were tall, far taller than anything else they had seen. They looked modern. The trunks were perhaps a bit thicker than normal trees. They were conifers, and if John had seen them back home, he wouldn't have thought them out of place. John slowed as they moved into the trees. He traded Manny for the big double. The damn thing was heavy, but its weight felt good in his hands. The feeling was different under the branches, out of the sun. It was cooler. John saw his first flyers. He was not sure if he would call them birds. They did fly, but then they would land on the side of a tree and cling to it with all 4 limbs, like a squirrel. Their cry was more of a hiss, and they also had teeth and lizard-like heads. The porters chopped dead wood and made bundles of it to carry back. John turned to Manny and said one word,
Water.
Manny looked at the tracker, and wordlessly, the Maasai led the 2 of them deeper into the woods. The land sloped down slightly, and at the far edge, they came to a rock shelf. The stream had run along below the ledge. The grove was in the bottomlands below the shelf. A deeper pool had formed here, where a bend followed the wall. It was brushier here, but nothing moved. The Maasai knelt in a more open trail leading to the water. Manny and John joined him, and he motioned to a large footprint, outlining it with the motion of his hand. It had 3 toes and was 18 inches long. He started to outline other tracks, some of different shapes. John looked out at what he could see of the horseshoe-shaped pool. He turned to Manny.
Is there anything in the water?
On second thought, he added,
Crocodile.
Manny turned and said one word to the tracker, who turned and looked over the water and then turned and stared back at them. John took that to mean there was no way to know the answer. John turned back to Manny.
Bring the men. Fetch water.
Manny left as they watched over the waterhole. Nothing moved. The Maasai was like a statue. His eyes never left the water. Manny returned with the porters and the water cask. John motioned for him to wait as he got set up by a tree. The drop-off where the stream had cut into the side was about 2 feet. The low level left a small sandy bank beside the water. It was as good of a view as he would get. The tracker stood on the other side, with his spear raised, as the workers, one by one, filled the small barrels. Nothing exciting occurred. As they pulled back, John made them lay the barrels down so he could drop iodine tablets into them. It would spoil the taste, But he did not trust that stagnant pool. Water in Africa was bad enough. He hated to think what bugs might lurk here in the past. He sent the porters back to the camp with instructions to build a fire. Hopefully that would keep the animals away here, as it did in their own time. John wasn't sure how to do this. He tried to explain to Manny what he wanted. The tracker led them along the stream bed to the right, where the stream had undercut a medium-sized tree that had fallen across and was leaning against the rock ledge on the other side. They had a ladder up the 12-foot wall on the other side. It was more awkward than it sounded, but soon they were all safely on the escarpment. Looking out, John could see it was more of a dry plain here, uneven as it sloped down to the edge. They returned to the pool. The top of the ledge had no cover, but to the right side it was a bit flatter, and they could lay down on their bellies with little showing over the edge. It gave them a decent view of most of the pool. They could not see the far end around the bend. The early evening air was still. John didn't know how sensitive the animals would be to smell. Would they even react if they caught the men's scent? The ground was rocky. Small pebbles bit into John. He couldn't seem to get comfortable. His neck quickly grew tired, and he wound up resting it on his arm. None of these things seemed to bother the other men. The sun grew lower, and they continued to wait. John had imagined something more exciting. The sun was setting behind them, and was still lighting up the tops of the trees, but everything below them was in shadow and getting dimmer. It was that time when the sky was too bright to allow your eyes to adjust to the darkness on the ground. Soon they might have to give this up. John did not fancy walking back to the camp in darkness. They heard movement in the trees. Something was there, but John could not see anything. Then to their left, movement. He could see a head, strangely shaped. It had what looked like a bill, almost like a duck. The skull protruded backward behind the neck, almost like it was trying to counterbalance itself. All John could see was a silhouette. The head was about 8 feet off the ground. It stayed there, swinging back and forth. Would it come forward? Would he get a better shot? John slowly shifted the big rifle and pulled the gun into his shoulder. It didn't seem to notice the movement. It came forward a bit, but then stepped back. It also was cautious about the water. John thought, there's a lesson there. Then it hopped. It landed on the mud of the lower bank, with its forelegs in the water. John could see it now. It looked awkward. Its hind legs were larger than its forelegs, but it seemed to be a quadruped. Its large, heavy tail balanced the front half of the body. It waited, looking both ways, then lowered its head to drink. John had completely forgotten what he was doing. He sighted down the barrels of the gun, but could barely make out the front sight. The range was short. He aimed as best he could. He didn't know where the heart was. Most of its weight seemed to be balanced on its large hind quarters. In a moment of inspiration, John shifted his aim back to the hip and pelvis. The big rifle roared, kicking into his collarbone like a mule. He looked up, reorienting himself in time to watch it drop. It let out a long, deep honking sound, almost like a foghorn on a ship. John tried to get the gun back into position. He drew himself up onto his knees, kneeling and lifting the gun to his aching shoulder, and tried to sight again. The beast was down and had rolled onto its side, away from the men. He sighted in the chest, below the armpit. The gun fired again, or perhaps detonated would be a better word. He found himself on his back, having rolled backward when the gun fired. John sat up and looked again. It was still down on its side. Its legs were still kicking. He opened the action, the cases ejecting, and fumbled for more cartridges. John closed the action and sighted again, bracing his arm on his knee to try to help support the weight of the big gun. He tried for a spot a bit lower, and the gun roared again. He was once more looking at the sky. Sitting up with the gun in his lap, John saw that the beast was no longer moving. That was good. He was not sure he could have fired again. He slumped there, looking down at his kill in the water. John had just killed a dinosaur.